we'll start to get underway here. So my name is Janet McLean, and I am the Education and Engagement Lead for Family Caregivers of BC. Ready for joining us tonight. It's getting to be that busy time of year, so I'm really appreciating that you carved out this time. Tonight's webinar is Anger, Guilt, and the Family Caregiver, and I could tell from the registration that this is a topic that is relevant. Lots of people signed up for this webinar, so I think it was a good topic and good timing. Family Caregivers of BC, I mentioned previously that we are a provincial nonprofit dedicated 100% to the well-being of family caregivers. So it's a huge opportunity for us to have provincial coverage. 29 years, coming up 30 years. We were the first of our kind in Canada. There's only 2 others, one in Alberta and one in Nova Scotia, that have the same provincial scope. And since 2010, we've been serving the whole province, and the last 5 years with Ministry of Health Patients as Partners funding, which allows us to run webinars like this across the province. And it's a huge benefit for our caregivers, and it has become a huge pillar of our resources as an organization. So this slide just gives you a bit of an overview about the different services that we have for caregivers, and I would encourage you to go to our website, which is noted here at the bottom of this slide. So it's www.familycaregiversbc.ca. In a nutshell, we have 3 main areas of support for caregivers. First is one-to-one caregiver support. So we have a toll-free number that you can call from anywhere in the province. That's noted on the top right-hand box, 1-877-520-3267. If you call that number Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4, you will talk to a real person who will listen to you, help you think through your situation, possibly, direct you to some information, refer you to an organization possibly in your local community, and also, help you with navigation, and just really provide some emotional support. That's something that we find caregivers really need. So please don't ever hesitate to call. There's no limit on the number of calls. It's totally free. That's what the government funding provides. So we really encourage you to do that. We also have coaching for really complex situations. We have people who are specially trained, gerontologist and counselor, who handle coaching calls. And so if you're dealing with something that's really, really complicated, we'll refer you to those specialists, and they will do a series of calls with you. We also help to establish support groups throughout the province, and we run support groups on Vancouver Island. So we have a list of family support groups, family caregiver support groups on our website, along with a lot of other resources. If you go to our listing of resources, you'll see that we have articles on almost every topic of interest to family caregivers. I've already talked about our webinars and workshops under our education pillar, but we do presentations and other online types of activities. Collaboration and engagement is a really important area for us. Provincially, what we do here is we make sure that the family caregiver voice is represented in health system planning and delivery. And so if this is an area of interest to you as a caregiver and you would like to become a family caregiver rep, I would encourage you to go on our website. There's a place on our website where you can send us an email to express your interest, and we would love to hear from you. We are always looking for caregivers who would be willing to talk about their experience and help. Encourage you to keep that kind of thinking in the back of your head. So tonight's webinar presenter is Maureen Grant, and Maureen, we're very lucky to have Maureen as a resource for family caregivers of BC. She's been working with us for a number of years. Maureen has an extensive background as a social worker in healthcare and has worked, one of the biggest benefits is she's worked across the system. So when we say that, we mean that she's worked in community, she's worked in acute care, specialized services, geriatric services. So as you can read here, she's had a lot of experience across the whole continuum of care, and that makes her someone who really understands things like transitions, the difficulty of going from one part of the system to another, and she was also a case manager in community, and so she just has a really good understanding of what happens for family caregivers as they're going through the system. Maureen, as I said, does these kinds of webinars for us, has written articles for our newsletter, and has a private practice now on the island supporting families experiencing these challenges. So I'm going to now turn it over to Maureen, and as I said, I encourage you to just type into the chat box, and I'll do my best to keep up. Over to you, Maureen.
Great, thank you. So my first question is, I hope everybody can hear me okay. And my second thought that I completely forgot to put in my bio was the fact that I actually was a caregiver for my mother and also my grandmother. And my mother passed away at the age of 94 a few years ago. And so not only have I experienced this on a professional level, but certainly very much as a personal challenge as well. And so many of the issues around guilt and anger and frustration and the challenges that we all face every day when we're looking after somebody, I know firsthand as well. So I should make sure I include that piece, because that's very critical. And I was very fortunate that I got to be involved with the Family Caregivers Network when it was just a very small, not even an organization. It was just a group of people that were wanting to set it up, and a social worker from one of the facilities, it got going, and it's just amazing how much it has grown in the last 30 years here. So it's quite exciting to see how much broader the scope has become from just being a very local little Victoria thing to being the entire province. So again, welcome, and thank you all for being here. I will get started. Please feel free to add in any conversation, questions as we go along. I'm happy to kind of, answer things that if they come up, or if not, there's going to be some time at the end for that. Just starting off here, what I'm hoping to cover today is a little bit better understanding of guilt and anger, and how that's a very normal emotion for a caregiver just because of all of the challenges that people deal with. We're going to look at some of the things that trigger that, and also, hopefully some coping strategies, and give yourself a bit of a break about it all, because, you are doing a great job, and it's amazing how responsibly people are in terms of providing care to loved ones. So thank you all for taking the time. I know it's a really busy time of year in December here, and I'm really thrilled at the turnout of people we've got today. Have to do a little technical thing here, figure out where, okay, there we go.
There we are.
And I was supposed to push to move things forward. Technology is okay. So I just want to start off just with this picture, because I think it's so indicative of the kinds of things that happen as a caregiver. It's topsy-turvy. You never really know in what direction you're going, and it's a very much an emotional roller coaster. I think you'll probably all agree with that it's very much how we feel, ups and downs every day. And then just starting off here with the feeling guilty, I think, again, too, we are constantly trying and striving our very best to do a good job. And, we're constantly feeling like we're not doing enough, not doing it well enough. So I thought I would just start off also with just a question here, which is, what kinds of symptoms, what is it that you feel when you feel angry and guilty? How do you feel about that? What do you do? How do you react? I know for me it was always sort of a gut feeling, like it was like, oh no, I should do more, I need to work harder, I need to, I was always striving to be better at what I was doing, and it always felt like I was never doing quite enough. So, there was a lot of the experience of feeling quite emotional at times. It was hard to see people and their health changing, and I'm sure many of you have experienced that. So I just wanted to have you just think about that for a second and let me know, how does that feel to you? Like what kinds of symptoms can you identify when you're feeling guilty and angry?
So are you talking about physical symptoms, Maureen?
Well, it can be physical, it can be emotional symptoms, it can be, it can be being irritable, and just, whatever people feel. Like what kinds of things are out there for you that you're, experiencing? Because I think we all feel it in a slightly different way. So it's always good to, just sort of see. And because sometimes we don't always identify it as being perhaps some of that guilt and anger that we're having to deal with, right? So, so I was hoping that we could just, start with just sort of getting in touch a little bit with, okay, how do I feel this? What does this mean to me? But lots of people that are going to add a sort of thing here. Okay, so shortness of breath, yes, right? Feeling like you're not a good enough daughter, not doing enough for your mom. Certainly, that's very much the case. Sadness, loneliness, feeling isolated, feeling like a bad daughter. That's a very common one, isn't it, right? Hopeless, helpless, irritable, frustrated. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that, we just feel yucky, right? We don't really know what we can do to change things, and it can be a lot for us to have to deal with on a regular basis. I have a really good quote that I thought I would read, that I'll just do in a minute. But I wanted to just mention too that, there's such a range of emotions that we experience, and we never know what to expect. So that can make it extremely difficult, because it's not like, every Tuesday night you're going to, go fix dinner. It's like you go Tuesday night and you don't know what's happened, all day long, and so you may be facing something completely different than what you anticipate, right? So we need to just kind of keep thinking about what we're doing here. But this is the quote that I wanted to read. It's by a gentleman named Barry Jacobs from the Association of Retired Persons. And I think it really reflects a lot of what we go through. Whenever I'm too busy to visit my mother at her nursing home, I feel guilty for neglecting her. Cancel other family plans, I say to myself. Then you can go see her and alleviate your guilt. But when I announce this to my wife, I suddenly feel guilty for disappointing her. She rightly points out that it's excessive guilt that compels me to see my mother so often. I then feel guilty for feeling so guilty. Pretty neurotic, huh? I wish it weren't so. But guilt is an ever-present emotion for many family caregivers for a variety of reasons. Because of what we haven't done for our ailing loved ones, sometimes because of what we did, which we think was not enough and was inadequate, because we can still function physically and cognitively in ways which they are no longer capable of, so we feel guilty for being able to do things. And a little guilt along these lines probably makes us more sensitive and attentive, but too much of it torments us and saps all possible joy. So I think a lot of what we're trying to do is to get a bit of a balance here between, providing care, managing our emotions, and still being able to enjoy our own lives, right? And no matter how much we try, we will always be experiencing some feelings of inadequacy and guilt. It kind of just goes along with the job. All right, and we've had a few more comments here, right? It's really hard to imagine the whole range of emotions, but exhaustion is certainly another one. And it's not just physically exhausting, it's also emotionally exhausting. Thanks for that, Karen. And feeling like there's no way of winning. And I think a lot of that is just because we know that in the process of caregiving, our loved ones are going to decline, and that there's nothing really we can do to change that. But it's trying to, again, create a bit more of a balance in our life. Okay. I always like to do definitions because sometimes I think that's, it's hard to define these things on our own. So Guilt is a bad feeling caused by knowing or thinking that you have done something bad or wrong. Feelings of culpability, especially for imagined offenses or from a sense of inadequacy. And to me here, the key word is imagined, because I think as caregivers, we are all doing the best that we can given our circumstances, and a lot of it is our own interpretation that we're not doing well enough. So imagined is really the part where we want to try not to, not to actually feel that we are doing a bad job, because we are doing a good job. It's just very hard. I'm just going to touch on a few of the reasons why we feel angry and guilty. A lack of control. Oftentimes, of course, we can't anticipate what's happened. Our family members' health changes quickly, so we don't have control over their well-being. We oftentimes don't have control over their environment. We want things to be the way they were. We are easily frustrated because, again, it's not like an ABC process. It's an up and down, good days, bad days. We have a lot of exhaustion. And I think for me, one of the real things is the injustice, that it's very hard, life is not fair. And, dealing with that injustice every day of how do we cope with, these changes when there's not the services always, or the support that we need, the sense of unfairness that, this has happened to someone we care about. Those are a lot of the very common things that, we all experience. And, it can be a flitting thought early in the day. It can be what keeps you awake at night. These are a lot of the kinds of reasons that are kind of behind it, We have a lot of stress because we're being pulled in many directions. There's a lot of sadness and depression. The lack of support that we feel, perhaps because we don't have other family members, or they don't live close by, or we're not connected into other services, so we're really doing it on our own a lot of times. And just the competing demands of daily life. If you're working outside of the home, if you have young children, if you have, oftentimes you have people who are in a situation where they're not just caring for a grandparent, they may also be caring for an elderly aunt and a brother who's had a car accident, and so you've got many, many directions that you're being pulled. And I love this quote because, again, it just reflects that we are all very strong. I am strong, but I am tired. Right? I think that really says so much about what it is. And that feeling of aloneness that you mentioned, DJ, is one of the things, which is really what's so great about the Caregivers Network, is that it's a great way of, reaching out to somebody who understands your situation, and they can, connect you into services, give you some support, and, help you, maybe with some information, maybe with some local resource. And sometimes, it's really just being able to speak with someone who knows the situation, who's been through it, who has a bit of a chance to, share their insights with you. Anybody else have any ideas here? Have I missed anything? I'm sure I have. There's always a million reasons why, All right, so, anger and guilt are both very normal emotions. We feel them all the time, and they can become very overwhelming when you get really, burdened by them. And we have, those feelings that up and down every day when we're caring for family members. And there's lots of reasons for it. Sometimes it's just the pure stress of the unending demands of, being pulled in a million directions. Sometimes we can have what I call toxic parents, which are people who, you may not be really a good relationship with them, and now there's a big expectation that you're, obviously the child is going to look after the parent, and yet it may be very difficult. They may not be easy people to help, and there may be a very limited relationship there. Sometimes it's just the challenging behaviors that some individuals develop. I've had clients who've had spouses with Pick's disease, and they had to basically lock every single cupboard and food source and the fridge because they would just eat all day long anything they could get into, bleach, anything they could find. So, like just dealing with someone with a mild to moderate dementia who can be, challenging just in their repetitive demands, and that is one thing. But when you have someone with, extreme behaviors or very stubborn personalities, which is, I think a lot of us can relate to that, makes it that much more difficult for us to cope. So we feel guilty because we don't have perhaps the best relationship with that person we're caring for. We find we're embarrassed by the behaviors that they demonstrate. We're pressured by being pulled in lots of directions, and then there's sometimes it's just the repetition that they ask you the same question 100 times in a day, and you're sort of thinking, okay, I'm just going to pull my hair out now. So, these are just a few of the feelings that we have around that area. Okay. So are there things that set that off for you? Like, are there ideas that, like certain things just trigger those feelings of anger and guilt? Because I find, like I know for me, it was sometimes when my mother was being incredibly nice to me, and I was thinking, oh my God, she would just, like it would just trigger this sort of, I can't believe this, like she's, or sort of the martyred idea, like, oh, well, it's okay, I'll be fine, just leave me alone. We all have different things that trigger our emotions of guilt and anger, right? And certainly I love this picture because it's what you feel like doing in private when you're actually having to maintain another face in public, right? Yeah. So I see that we might be getting a bit of a response to that one, so that's always good because I do like it when we see what people are thinking.
Oh.
Here's a very good one, being mean. So sometimes, parents can, I think oftentimes as people get older, they lose a lot of their social filters, particularly if they've had a stroke or they have some dementia, And my mother would say things like, tell that home support worker to go away, I don't like her. And I'm going, oh my gosh, I can't believe she just said that in front of this poor woman. So, you're just, you've got sort of that type of thing, or people are just generally needy, or they are not able to express their wishes or needs in an appropriate manner. One gentleman that I worked with many years ago, he said, okay, Mom, I can take you to the store on Tuesdays. His health was not well. In fact, he was having chemo, and here he is looking after his mother. And so, he would make his plan. He would take her. They would get the groceries. He said, have you got everything? Is it good? Yes, yes, yes. And they get home. He goes, oh, I forgot milk, but you can take me again tomorrow. So some of that just complete lack of understanding and insight that you might have your own needs and issues that you're dealing with sometimes can be a big one for sure. So, yes, and certainly when you see a family member who's really unable to do anything for themselves anymore, and yet you know them as a very capable person, and there they are, not able to manage, needing total care. That can be incredibly frustrating, and you do feel very guilty because those are some of those things that we don't have control over. So I think a lot of that is the lack of control. Yeah. And yes, and as Dana's saying here too, right, oftentimes medications can affect a memory, and or people with dementia forget things that, have been, that they've done for years and years and years, right? It's hard to keep it in perspective sometimes, for sure, right? So, again, thank you all for sharing those ideas. It's very true, Karen here is saying the lack of any awareness of my needs. And definitely that is one of the big ones, isn't it? Because sometimes if a parent can show some gratitude or some ability to be thankful in some small way, it makes it much easier. But when they have no insight into the fact that, you've given up, 3 other things in order to be there to spend time, and yet there's not that sense of appreciation. I think for a lot of people, just having a little bit of a thank you goes a long way. But people oftentimes in that situation, because of their health issues, are not able to make those comments or give you that feedback. Yeah.
So a lot of these comments, Maureen, I'm looking at them, in terms of dementia and Alzheimer's, as Maureen said, like it's so hard because it's recognizing that it's the disease and not the person, and somehow detaching from that irritating repetitive behavior or even the meanness, or, sometimes they just have no idea that that's what they're doing.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and that's, I think, what makes it so much more difficult is that they have no insight, and, you're sitting there going, oh, or they have a good day and you think, oh, well, maybe it's not so bad, but those things are just a constant challenge to have to deal with for people. So we all face those kinds of concerns all the time. It's a very difficult thing, but, again, people are not alone. You can get a sense here from the fact that everybody is going through these types of issues. I really like my pictures, so this one I just had to throw in because it's one of those things. This is how you feel inside, right? But outside you've got this sort of, anyway, sort of normal look on your face, right? But this is like really what it's like inside, and I think we have to really identify that anger is a real reality for us, and that is a normal thing. It's easy to talk about some of the other challenges of caregiving, but it's hard because people feel bad when they say that they're angry. My girlfriend said to me a couple of weeks ago, she said, some days I wish my mother was dead. She says, and then I feel so awful for thinking that. But the last 5 years, and her mother is in her late 90s at this point, and has many, many, many challenges. And it's sort of, you think, well, darn, it's just not fair. So, that anger is there. It's underlying a lot of what we do. A lot of times we use humor to kind of think, oh, well, that's the way it is. But it is certainly one of the challenges that we all face in caregiving, right? And it's an incredibly strong emotion because, you think that someone's behaved in an unfair, cruel, or unacceptable way. And that's very true, right? Because it is unfair, and people can be cruel, and their behaviors can be unacceptable. So we have some validation for our feelings, right? But I think, again, the other underlying piece is that life is just not fair, and lots of times we have a lot on our plate, and it's a lot to handle. So, we want to keep that in perspective, that it's not like we're being abnormal. These are the kinds of things that we deal with all the time. All right, I'm just trying to read some of the notes here. I can't read and talk at the same time, I'm afraid.
Yeah, that we've had someone share about a book on coping with challenging behaviors, Cracking the Dementia Code. I hadn't heard of that one, Vaughn, so that's great. Thank you.
I love is the fact that, we share resources, because there's so often, like, people will have found something that works really well, or like a book that really resonates with them. And it's great when you see that, because you go, oh, okay, there's something else that I can do that will help, right? And again, the feeling short-tempered, you need to take a break. And so I'm glad, Lori, to see that you've looked at the respite and that you've booked a couple, because you do need to have a break. And oftentimes when you are taking a break, you feel guilty about taking a break too. That's, so even when you're doing what you need to do for yourself, you still can feel guilty. And that's just part of it all. So, okay.
Yeah. And I hope, Lori, when you're on your break, that you can do something that brings you joy. And that's one of the things Maureen talked about in the beginning of the webinar, that you need to connect with the joy in your life.
Yeah. So I think the comment, too, about having to lie, sometimes it's very difficult, because, if people actually, they say, well, why do you need a break? I'm the one that's sick, right? That's a very classic line. But sometimes, yes, it's easier to tell a small white lie than it is to say to them, look, I'm tired, I can't look after you anymore, I need to take time off. Sometimes it's easier to say, well, the doctor says I need some time off, or I'm, something else is happening, or whatever. So yes, those kinds of things, sometimes we have to do what we need to do in order to cope. Okay, and so that's kind of moving on to our next section here, which is, some timely tips on how to cope with our feelings and get a bit of a break from the stresses that we're under with the, caregiving that we're providing. So help is always a good thing. And I think that we all need help in one way or another, and we all have to be creative in how we find ways of getting help and make sure that we do reach out for help when we're caregiving. Okay. I think this one reflects a little bit of some of the conversation we had earlier. You can't control what you can't control, so you don't know what's going to happen. So sometimes we have to tolerate ambivalence, which is just sort of that lack of, there's not much I can do. I can only do the things that I can. And so what we're going to do is just move forward as best we can. And, if it's not a great day, then maybe I'll go make us a cup of tea and, not try to get into the emotions that she might be feeling. Just try and do something practical. Sometimes that's the thing. And sometimes, it's like, okay, you know what? I've been killing myself doing the laundry and running around. Why don't we just sit and have a cup of tea? And that will give us a bit of a break. Maybe we can have a conversation about the cat or something simple, and, just changing the pace, tolerating the fact that, this is the way caregiving can be sometimes, that it's not an easy thing to do, and we have to take time, just to sort of allow things to be. You might want to do something better. You wish you could take your mom out to something else, but the reality is that you're too exhausted. She's not going to enjoy it. The stress and struggle of getting her there would not be worth it, and maybe it's okay to just sit at home and sit and watch TV together or something, right? So there's a lot of ambivalence, I think, that goes along with this road. The other one that I like is sometimes, I say think like a toddler. And that does not mean treat your parent like a toddler, but it means think about the basic things. If the baby's crying, what's wrong? What does it need? Does it need to be changed? Is it hungry? Does it want comfort? What is it that they need at that point in time? And I like the thing, too, about, like, all behavior has meaning. So sometimes, if they're looking agitated, is something wrong? Are they in pain? Is there something that needs to be done? Are they trying to tell you something? Try to think about those things, and that will make a difference, for sure. I think, when you're trying to move forward on some of that, right? And if you think about it, if you're caring for a 3-year-old, you probably don't shout angrily at them because they can't comprehend the idea about waiting for 2 hours for dinner, right? You're more likely to redirect their attention, give them a snack. People who require care display very little ability for self-regulation. They can't follow complex logic, like whereas you and I can accept delayed gratification. Oftentimes people can't. They want their needs met right now. And it's very typical of people with dementia and other issues to want sort of an instant response. So if you think about that, like, okay, have we done the basics? What is it that their behavior might be trying to tell me that I'm not able to figure out at this point? So it's just thinking in a different perspective. And I'm sure you guys probably have some ideas here too, right? So music, reading a book, knitting together, listening to music. Yeah, so I mean, those are great ideas in terms of what can you do to, music can oftentimes relate to memories, history, obviously if people have favorite music and records, that's something that can be very positive and healing for people, right? Because music is something that, even though other parts of your brain may not be able to focus, the music can trigger some core memories, right? Right, so thanks for restating that. Imagining your care recipient so you can think about the demands in another way, right? Finding ways of coping too, like getting out in the garden, working in the garage, learning a new skill, taking a class. Those are all really good. Asking old stories, right? So reminiscing is certainly a good one, right? So, yeah. Thank you, guys. Okay. Other thing is, I like this one too, because what we oftentimes do is we forget about our own needs. And sometimes we're the one that's hungry or needing something for ourselves. So, this is a great one with this hungry thoughts are chasing me. So I wanted to just mention that, oftentimes the hardest time when, you're most likely to melt down is in the late afternoon, right? And it's usually when you're hungry. It's partly due to a natural drop in blood sugars that occur when you haven't eaten for a few hours, and that can impair your coping ability. But it can be your coping ability, and it can also be the person that you're caring for's coping ability. So making a point of having a cup of tea at a certain time every afternoon might be a good way of managing that. I know my daughter, when she was younger, well, even now, if she needs something to eat, she becomes this ogre. So it was either, you fed her or you put her to bed, because she was either tired or she was hungry. It was one of the two. So, get hungry, even if they can't recognize that can be a real core reason why behaviors change, why your ability to cope goes down. And so just having something to eat, just sort of, okay, I'm not feeling good, maybe I just need to have a bite to eat. Glass of water, cup of tea, and somebody mentioned earlier, like, listening to music. So you sit, listen to some music, and you have a cup of tea. So again, it's along the same idea here, making sure that you've got something good to eat, so that you're taking care of your own body at the same time. So that means, taking your medication and not forgetting to look after yourself, trying to regulate things so that you're balancing out your day. I'm sure lots of you have probably found that, right? You realize suddenly that you haven't had anything since breakfast and it's 3 in the afternoon, right? I think the other idea that is very common too is redirecting your anger. So sometimes, physically venting your own rage is a very positive thing, and it can be very therapeutic for you, right? So, if you're having a moment, you can always excuse yourself and go, into the other room and pound a pillow, or, say, I'm going to go outside and do some gardening, and go out and take your frustration out on the weeds. You can come to my house if you want to do that, actually. So that, sometimes it's just getting away, having a little bit of a break from whatever it is that you're finding incredibly difficult to deal with. And the other thing that you can do, if you're looking at it more in terms of a long-term strategy, getting into some kind of a regular exercise program is a really good thing, because physical activity is a really good mood booster, and it reduces your overall stress level and probably also your pent-up anger and frustration. So, if you have the chance to do that, then that is a really good thing. And I know what you're going to say to that, right, which is easier said than done, because it's very difficult to, build those things in. I was overhearing a conversation recently, and these people were saying, yeah, right, like that's going to happen, because, it's easy to say, it's hard to do. Building in something that is a positive for you, that can give you a bit more balance in your life, taking that break that you need. So it can be hard to do, but it's very worthwhile to take some time away and look after yourself here. We all need to do that, because if we don't look after our own health needs, then we're not going to be able to look after anybody else's. So if we're not paying attention to our own self, we fall apart, and then the whole situation becomes much more aggravated, right? So yes, thank you, Janet, for that comment. Dance like no one is watching, right? So all it is, you go, you put on your favorite music, you go in the bedroom, and you just, dance like crazy, like nobody's there, right? So, there's things that you can do with the person sometimes to take a break. Maybe having that cup of tea, sitting down together and not having to try and do something is a good idea. Maybe getting away is a good idea. So building in the respite, all of those things are very positive. They're great ways of dealing with the situation when it can get difficult. Yeah, sometimes a break from your routine is the very thing that you need. Okay, you can't draw from an empty well. Oftentimes, our impatience and our anger come from exhaustion, and caregiving can really sap your strength mentally and physically. It has a lot of negative effects on your health if it disrupts your sleeping or your eating habits. So taking a break is really, really critical to managing the emotional components of caregiving and the physical ones as well. All right. So I really like this slide, which is sort of some ideas on, moving forward here. What to do when you make a mistake. Take about 10 minutes to be upset about it. Do what you can to fix it. Take a deep breath. Forgive yourself and move on. Repeat as needed. That's your prescription for the future. So, we take some time. We think, okay, that fell apart pretty quick. What could I do differently next time? Or what can I do to kind of sort this out? And then you just breathe deep, because that's something that really helps your parasympathetic nervous system, and let it go, move forward. Right? Don't expect that you will always be able to maintain a perfectly patient attitude. That is not realistic. People are not perfect, and caregivers have more challenges than many, so we're even less perfect, right? When you experience, times of anger or impatience, first of all, just forgive yourself. Try to credit yourself for the thousands of times you've exhibited great patience, the hours and hours of loving care you've provided to your family members, and, give yourself some credit for what you have done. I think forgiveness is one of the big things here, right? Because when you forgive yourself and or you forgive other people, you don't change the past, you change the future, because it puts life in a different perspective, and it makes it a little bit easier to cope and move forward. Moving on in forgiveness. Okay, I'll go back to that one there. Okay, so yes, I do think that's the case, isn't it? That, we are always so ready to criticize ourselves and be, put ourselves down for not doing a good job. But we just have to let some of that go, and we do have to work on trying to forgive ourselves for that. Because what that works out to be is a recharging of our energy system, right? It refreshes us. It gives us a chance to relax. We move forward.
So Maureen, Dana made a really interesting comment about the previous slide about taking a break from the routine, and he said, I need a routine. So that's an interesting,
right.
That's a different kind of need, right? So your life as you knew it has disappeared, and all of the things that were familiar to you, I think that's one to put out there. Does anybody have any ideas about how to sort of reclaim some of those routines that you used to have? Or I guess that's kind of like respite and maybe taking that break for yourself, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I missed that comment, Dana. There's too many things happening here. So, but thanks for pointing that out, Janet. I think it's very true, because sometimes, your routine is no routine, because it's just you're flying by the seat of your pants and you're just doing whatever needs to be done. And you sort of think, okay, well, I'll get the laundry done this morning, or I'll do this or that. And then something happens and you have to clean up a spill because they dropped their cup of coffee, and, now you've got to clean the carpet and everything else, or you're trying to keep track of them and where they are and keep them out of danger. So it's true. It's very difficult sometimes to build in routines, other than if you can, have someone come in to provide some care. Then you have 2 or 3 hours when you can have a break and go and do something that gives you some time off, which is a positive thing, even if it's just time to get out and, go have coffee with a friend. One of the hardest things I think that people have to do is to have someone come in to help. It can be a very challenging, because there's lots of, there's lots of challenges with using the home support agencies. Oftentimes you get a lot of different people coming through. You can have, people that don't relate well. They're very focused on physical tasks. It's hard to have someone who can just provide companionship. But, for example, the Alzheimer's Society, I believe they still have sort of volunteer visitors who will come and spend time with people. That's through the First Link program. Sometimes you can get someone from a church, or if you're connected to someone, or if there's a really good friend of your parent or spouse who can come over, and they come Tuesdays, for 2 hours or something, and sit and do crosswords or play cards or chat about old times. So if you've got anyone at all that you can bring in, you can look at ways of doing that, right? And Janet's just mentioning that they've got a great webinar on building caregiver support networks. So that's probably got a lot of very much more specific suggestions on ways of helping with that, because that, again, the key is not to be the sole person providing care. You really need to bring in other people. I know it was very difficult for me to bring in other people, but it was the best thing I could have done, because then at least I got a break from providing care, and I could work on some things and they would do other things. And I used a lot of community programs to basically add to my repertoire of things. So, a meal delivery program so I wasn't always feeling I had to cook interesting and exciting meals for my mom. There were meals that she liked in that program that I could use. There was activity programs, so she went out to a day program 1 day a week, and that meant that I didn't have to worry about her being on her own. There are monitoring programs, so if you're not there, you can kind of do check-ins. There's lots of different kinds of services in the community that you can, access to build in a routine. So it may not be a routine for you, but if it's a routine for the person you're looking after, if they can, have any of those services built in for them, then it takes some of the load off of you, which means that you don't have such a buildup of frustration. But yeah, I totally get it that it's difficult to have a routine for a lot of people, or their life is just routine and they want something more exciting happening. So it really can vary, right?
Right, and Peggy just typed in about the Minds in Motion program. That's an awesome program through the Alzheimer's Society for people who might be looking after someone with a dementia, and they run that program across the province. So the best way to access that is to go onto their website, and you can type in Minds in Motion. It'll take you to where they offer those programs across the province. And just to go back to a point that Maureen made about, asking for help or looking for help, the webinar that I mentioned and typed in our website address, it's a recorded webinar that you can watch. One of the things that struck me about the advice in that webinar was, so often as caregivers we're asked, how are you doing? Do you need any help? And our response is usually, I'm okay, I'm coping. This webinar really encourages you to be ready for a question like that and have some specific tasks that people can realistically help you with. Hopefully they're people that your care recipient knows, so it's not going to be like bringing a stranger into the home. They would be more open to it. But things like, can you come and just have a cup of tea with mom, maybe once every couple of weeks, that would be great. So it's time specific. You're telling the person what they can do. They can manage that in their schedule. There's been great ideas, come and read, or come and, watch a movie, or come and play a game, or whatever seems most appropriate. But try not to turn down those offers of help. They are gold. So, yeah, it's just a...
I know one of the, one woman, she organized, one of her friends was her husband was quite a woodworker at one point, so she organized taking him to their friend's house who he had spent a lot of time with, and they would just putter around in the workshop, just not doing power tools or anything, but they were just, out there in the woodworking shop, which was, a familiar place for him, and it was a really good break for her, and, he really enjoyed, going out to help his friend with, the workshop things. So that was a good one. And sometimes if people have very specific interests, then it's finding something that, can play into that. If they've always been avid fishermen, then it's maybe the fishing show on TV that they really enjoy and can watch for an hour or two. Or whatever, like, great forest hikes or just depending on what they were interested in. Maybe it's a show on knitting a sweater or something. Sometimes you can find things that will provide some distraction, because that's the other thing, is redirection and distraction can be huge in, providing a break so that, things don't build up. Yeah. And there are programs in the community for sure. There's, lots of day programs. There's ones for people with dementia specifically, and then there's other ones that can be, brought in. Sometimes you can bring people into the home to provide help. Sometimes you can find someone who can do a little bit of the practical and provide some socialization. I know of one lady, and they hired someone to help her husband with the cooking because she wasn't able to do it anymore. And ultimately, it ended up that this woman had a real interest in art, and the client had been quite artistic in her youth, and ended up, when this worker came, they would spend some time painting. At 92, she was doing that. So sometimes, if you can find the right fit or match, it can be a really good way of building those things in. But it's true, it's very much trying not to be the sole person to be looking after someone. Any other comments? Feel free. I think the other thing, too, is that, we always have to think about it as maintaining a balance. There's always going to be high points and low points in a day. And if you can kind of think about a day in terms of, okay, well, normally the morning's better, so that's when we want to accomplish these kinds of things. And the afternoon is more unpredictable, so we'll just do something simple then, So we can build in tasks for people to do, too, so that we have activities, folding laundry, polishing silver sometimes, different things like that. People oftentimes just enjoy the day-to-day basic routines. So it might be washing dishes. So maybe they wash the dishes and then you rewash them later. But, giving them things to do that they can, work on. So keep in mind that it's up and down every day, and there's going to be good days and there's going to be bad days, but the key is always trying to maintain some kind of a balance.
Grill asked a question, and I don't know how to answer it. It's, can you expand your care recipient social network? I think that's a really interesting question. So if I'm understanding, Grill, you're asking, is there a way to introduce your care recipient to other people? And we talked about the Minds in Motion program, so if they have a dementia, there are, or adult day programs, but maybe you were thinking about something else. I don't know what you think, Maureen.
Well, first of all, what I would look at is what has this person been interested in the past? What kinds of social connections do they have? And can they be revived in some way? Is there, something that, you could take them to a soccer game, or you could have them watch, kids playing baseball and use that as a link in, or it depends on who you know. Sometimes you may have a friend who's willing to help with certain things. Sometimes you can, hire paid staff, because the thing with friends and family is it's all well and good until they decide to go down to the States for their 6 months of the year, So sometimes they would love to help out, but then they're not going to be around. And what you need, hopefully, is something more consistent. So if they've been involved in a church group or any kind of a service organization, if they've, there are, services through the health authority like the day programs that can certainly expand networks. So my mother, I moved her from Vancouver to Victoria, And one of the first things I did was I got her going to one of the day programs because she had an opportunity then to make friends and to meet other people. So there's like the Minds in Motion program. There's, I don't remember what it's called. Anyway, there's several different programs in the community centers. There's various sort of mild activity programs for seniors. There's lots of things out there that, can expand. And sometimes what you can do is you can connect people into something, and then they might make a friend in that group. Again, a lot of this depends on what their underlying personality is. If they've never been a joiner, it's going to be very hard to get them to join. But if they're a one-on-one person and they've always loved playing soccer and they used to coach soccer, then you try and connect them into something to do with soccer, or see if you can find someone like the volunteer organizations that oftentimes will put out little blurbs looking for volunteers with specific skills, someone to sit and talk about knitting or bridge or whatever it is, or someone with an engineering background. So if you can find a commonality of an interest, then that's a good way of expanding a social group, because suddenly if you want them to become interested in water polo when they've never been near the water in their life, that's not likely to happen. So, if you can find something like that, that's good, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
So we've got some really good chatter here about, just really reaching out as a caregiver. Yvonne, I really appreciate you making that point, because I just wish there was a way that we could reach all the caregivers and let them know that there is support available for them. And Dana, I loved your comment about making a list of things you have to do, and the first thing on the list is making a list. So, it's those little things that make you feel like you're succeeding in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah, just doing one little thing every day that makes you feel good about yourself. Like, that's such a great thing to do.
Mm-hmm. And you'll find oftentimes, too, I think, Dana, your comment, too, about your wife getting quite upset about you having someone help clean the house, right? That it's very, it's all easy to say that, oh, well, we'll just bring somebody in. But the reality is that, you have some person you don't know come into your house and suddenly they're doing your dishes or cleaning your house, and you're going, well, what are you doing here? Like, if they don't have the understanding. So you found a really good way around that by doing some of the things together. And then sometimes you can kind of then add in that extra piece. So, okay, so Marcy's going to come and help me out on Thursdays, right? But maybe now that if you're retired, then you're there, and so it's not, it's not so intrusive for them, and then they get used to it. And then, oh, well, Marcy's coming, I'm just going to pop out for an hour. So you can kind of build in the time slowly. Like, sometimes we try to do things too quickly, and it's hard to do. Yeah. So, and Grill is mentioning something, a program in Quebec, which is, again, like each community will have different programs, but it sounds like it's some kind of community outreach as well. So that's great. So thank you for that. Sometimes what we need to do when we're, providing care, because it can be so challenging, is to focus on the reasons we're doing it. We're doing it because we care about the person, because we love them, because we have a relationship with them. And what we need to do is try and remember the funny times or the hilarious times in your relationship. Reminisce about the memories, savor the good days and or the good moments, right? So that's, it's trying to refocus instead of on all the negative things that may be happening, on some of the positives that, you have some time to spend with your person, and, it's good to have that positive kind of sense of joy. So, we do much better when we can think about those things as well, right? It puts it back in perspective. Why am I doing what I am doing, right? It's because I care. It's because I want to look at, I want this to be as good as I can make it, and that, this is something that, I value. This is why I'm doing it, because I got a lot from that in the past, because I care about them, because, they've done great things for me. I think, too, we have to look at, we've talked about this a lot actually already, which is that, we need help at times. So, we all are in a position where we need to reach out for help. It's not the easiest thing to do, but it is something that gets easier the more we do it. So it may be something small to begin with. It may be just, okay, well, I'm just going to, on Thursday nights, I'm not going to cook dinner. I'm just going to do the meal program. In Victoria, we have a new one called Skip the Dishes. So you can order in from various restaurants, and you just, have a different kind of a meal, and you don't have to cook, which is a great idea. Sometimes, people don't always appreciate some of the seniors meal programs, but, they miss not being able to go out to their favorite restaurant. A lot of those restaurants there's delivery services now, so they can get that meal and you can have it at home maybe if they're not well enough to go out. So even things like that can build in something. So once a week you treat yourself to something like that. Right. But it's true because, just even having someone to talk to on the phone is a good thing. So the Family Caregivers of BC, again, all those programs that Janet mentioned at the beginning that are all listed, and they'll be in the PDF. Their website is a huge resource in terms of maybe thinking about things differently, looking at what other alternatives you might be able to use to connect to various services, thinking outside the box a little bit. Sometimes it's looking at what you've got in your toolbox to help with these things on a day-to-day basis. One of the hardest things in life is letting go, whether it's guilt, anger, love, loss, or betrayal. Change is never easy. We fight to hold on, and we fight to let go. That's a quote by Marie Rees, and I think it's very true and particularly reflective of caregiving because, every day we're facing the challenges of having to let go of the person who we used to know, who used to be an involved spouse or a caring father, and now they may not even recognize you, or your relationship is so based on just the basic survival piece now that we lose things every day with caregiving. So just recognizing that fact that it's very hard for us to, have to face this on a daily basis because we are constantly having to let go of that person, let go of that level of ability that they had yesterday that they no longer have today. And that can be very angst-producing. We constantly want the best for them, and so we're always having to keep that in perspective that, the whole process of caregiving is the process of letting go of what we've known and what we've had in the past because, change is, the only thing that's constant is change. Isn't that one of the classic sayings? Because, every day will be different, every challenge will be different, and we just have to be flexible and be able to move on. I'm sure some of you can relate to that one. I think that one of the hardest things, that's I think why we feel the guilt is because, why has this happened? Why is this person not able to do what they've been doing? Just, getting towards the end here, I think, again, anything that you can do to kind of restore your own sense of well-being in caring, be it yoga or meditation, or there's a great free meditation site that you can click into on your phone and just listen to before you go to bed called Insight Timer, which is a free app, which is a great one if you want to try meditating, or it's relaxation exercises, and there's all kinds of stuff on it. I think there's 12,000 meditations on it, and they're all free, so that's a great thing. But it's finding sort of something that gives you meaning and purpose in your life, and something that builds you up instead of, creating more challenges for you. So I think we should always be thinking about that. Okay, so what have I done for my soul today?
So, Maureen, is that Insight Timer?
Yeah. INSIGHT Timer, TIMER.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
So and so it's they have 5 or 6 new ones every day, and they have hundreds of them online. So I oftentimes will just put that on at night with my headphones and fall asleep listening to it. So half the time I don't actually listen to it because it just is a good way to fall asleep. But there's always different things that body relaxation and dealing with anxiety, or for feelings of depression or various things. So there's lots and lots of good meditations on that. That's just another thing. That one you don't have to actually go out and do anything, because sometimes it's just the thought of actually having to go somewhere to do something to add in is a challenge. So yeah. So what we want to do is we want to make it as easy as possible to make some changes here, and to deal with those challenges that we experience every day with the caregiving, right?
I'm just typing in here, Maureen, that for anyone who's interested, we also did a webinar on mindfulness practices for caregivers, and it's actually like a meditation webinar. So it might be another resource that you want to check out. It's on our website.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. And the Family Caregivers website is huge. It has, I would say you probably have hundreds of webinars now that you've done that are all online. And then there's also tons of them that, of these various presentations and different things. And also the newsletter is an excellent way of kind of staying connected, and you can get that online as an e-newsletter. So that's certainly something else that just, gives you little things, food for thought on a regular basis every month. So that would be good. So, okay. This slide here is really, it takes a village, which is really just talking about it takes many, many people to look after someone, and that you should never think of yourself as being the only person. There's other family members, there are friends, there's public and private resources, there's the Caregivers Network, and many, many, many other organizations which provide different kinds of services and programs for people. So, keep an open mind. Don't immediately veto the thought, oh, well, no, she'd never like that. Give it a try. Maybe it will turn out to be something worthwhile, or they may lead you to another idea. So I think, again, the key here is that what we want to do is we want to recognize that, there are lots of programs and services that we can connect into, and that it's important to do so. That respite and a break for the caregiver is probably the most critical piece of providing care and not burning out and getting overwhelmed with those
Hardest lesson.
It takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to provide care. And just in review, I think we've sort of talked a lot about what some of the causes of guilt and anger are in caregiving, and hopefully we've covered some of what might be triggering those emotions for you. We've talked a lot about different ways of coping with those feelings and with just the caregiving burden in general. And I just want to give you a reminder to be gentle on yourself. Don't feel guilty if you experience anger or impatience, disgust, or any of the other negative emotions that you come across in your caregiving journey. Sometimes just acknowledging these feelings can help to dissipate them. Enlist a trusted confidant who is willing to hear your frustration and anger without judging you or trying to fix the problem. That could be the Caregivers Network. And, you might find that this alone gives you the ability to cope much better with the emotions that can accompany your caregiving journey. Don't judge your emotions. They all assist. Anger can give you the energy to make changes in your life. Find other alternatives. Seek other solutions. Use it as a force for good. That would be my parting comment, I think, other than if you have questions, comments, ideas, thoughts, other things you thought about but we didn't have a chance to talk about. I'm open to anything at this point. We've got a few minutes.
We'll be sending out notices, and I just want to thank you all for joining us tonight.
And thank you, Janet, for keeping us on track and organized and doing all that techie piece, and for all the information about what's going on at the Family Caregivers of BC. Thank you. And thank you all for taking the time and attending, and I've enjoyed it very much, and I hope you've gotten something from it. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Have a good rest of your evening, and we will see you soon. Bye for now.
Okay. Bye. We're staying up